Yeah, and we are going to dwell a little bit into Abraham. But before we do that, I want to talk about what a myth is. And this will be important for our understanding of how we approach the whole story of Abraham. You know, in our day and age, when we say somebody tells us a story, we say, oh, it's just a myth. What we mean by that, it's not true. But originally, myth was something very sacred. A myth, as Gene Houston, very famous thinker and psychologist, said, a myth is something that may have never happened, but it happens all the time. So it never happened on the level of time and space, maybe, but it reflects a process that's in us that's happening all the time. It's important to think about this for a minute, because now when we read a text or a scripture, let's say the Bible, we think, oh, is it true that Moses went from here to there? Is it true that Abraham was sacrificing his son? Are these things true? And as the rabbi in my synagogue says, these things are true, and some of them may have even happened. It's true not on the level of history and time of space, because the whole obsession with history and with a quote unquote objective perspective has only emerged in the last few centuries. All those texts, they are not interested in telling you what happened in time and space. They are interested in reflecting to you and to me aspects of our personality that we are not in touch with normally. And so when I read, I remember that after the moon landing, one of the moon landings, there was one astronaut who was a fundamentalist Christian, and he came back and he had access to a lot of money, and he created an archaeological delegation to go to Mount Ararat in Turkey in order to find Noah's Ark, in order to find archaeological evidence for Noah's Ark. I would have been personally very disappointed if he had found anything. Because for me, Noah's Ark is not a story that happened so many thousands of years ago. It's something that reflects a story about my life right now, my aspects of my personality. It's in this sense that we will be studying the figure of Abraham. Not as some dude who walked in the desert 3,500 years ago or whatever, with his family moving from one part of the Middle East to another part of the Middle East, but as some structure in me. So when I say, oh, the Jewish tradition says that Abraham was such and such, yeah, we will use that language. But we will use that language and remind ourselves that this means that the Jewish tradition is at least from a mystical point of view, is talking about something, some process in us. So let's look at the story. Abraham appears on the scene very early in the story of Genesis, in the book of Genesis. It's chapter 12 is the beginning of a few chapters where he's kind of like the main star. You know, this division into chapters is not the original division of the Torah. It was a division that was later on put by Christian scholars. And because the Christian scholars went into discussions and forced the Jewish scholars to discuss with them, then we had to do the same division so we would both know what we're talking about. But the original division of the chapters of the Torah, it was divided by certain portions according to the year. So every Saturday, every Shabbat in the synagogue, they read another one of those portions. And over the year, they finish the entire reading through the entire Torah, through the entire 5 books of Moses. And so Abraham is the star of the third portion. So the first portion is about Adam and the first creation of man. Then the next portion is about Noah. And it's from Abraham on, from the third portion on, that Abraham starts appearing. And those of you who will take the course, we will invite you, if you want to read those very few chapters. It's not a lot of reading, but you don't have to read it. And the interesting thing about Abraham, in the tradition, they say that it's the first human being that God said, oh, I finally succeeded. That the first human beings kept, like, at first people were so evil that the flood came and wiped it all out. And again, remember, I'm talking about a myth. There is no historical evidence, and the videos and audios from that period have been lost. So we have no proof of anything. But so the first people were so evil that God decided to wipe them all out. And then you say, what about Noah? He was not wiped out, and he's also described as Ish Tzadik Tamim, a righteous and innocent man. So why is Abraham considered the first successful human? And that is because Noah obeyed God. And God told him to build the ark, and he built the ark. And he saved his family, and he saved all the animals. But Abraham went one step further. He cared so much about other people that he argued with God. If Abraham had been with the flood, he would argue with the world, what are you doing? Are you wiping all humanity? What is this? Noah just, okay, God, you told me to build an ark, I'll build an ark. And it took a lot because, as the Jewish tradition tells us, it took him more than 100 years to build the ark. It was so big. And all the people were laughing at him and deriding him. What is this ark that you're building? Are you crazy? So it took a lot of internal strength and faith in God to go against the grain. And that's also something that we are invited to. Is there something in us that is willing to go against the grain, against the times, and really be faithful to what we deeply know is the most important? But Abraham went further when he was told that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were about to be killed because they're such sinners. He took God to task. And his care for other human beings And that's why in the tradition they say that Abraham is considered the first successful human. It's that part in us that cares deeply and is willing to take risks when we care deeply about something. So why are we studying Abraham at this time? I want to study, Martin and I, we decided we will go into Abraham because right now there's all kinds of craziness in the world. And the layer of the latest conflict in the Middle East is particularly jarring to many of us, irrespective of what your view is. And it's polarizing us, our communities, so deeply all over the world. And it's kind of sad and ironic, tragic and ironic, because all those three religions consider Abraham as their progenitors, as their progenitor. And I thought that at a time like this is the best to contemplate the Abraham in us. Rather than think that somebody else is bad, whatever your political view, these days, when you have a strong view, whoever thinks different than you is bad. That is how the discourse is happening right now. And I think this is the time where we need more of Abraham. We need more of that quality of care, of deep care for humanity of all kinds. I will say one more thing about Abraham that always touches me. You know, at one point, Abraham is told, and that's a fundamental story in the Jewish tradition, in the Torah, to go from where he was into the land that now we call Israel, the land of Canaan. That time we used to call it Canaan. And when he tells the story to his servant Eliezer and tell him, go, and he says, I came here to this land because in this land I could serve God of heaven and earth. And then he said, before that, I was there, and there God, the God of heaven, told me to come over to this land. And the rabbis, who never miss a detail, they say, why is he calling here? He's saying, here I serve the God of heaven and earth. And there, when he was told to leave, he only refers to God as God of heaven. Because they say, Abraham, with the way that he was with other people, with the way that he cared for other people, he was the one who brought God from heaven to earth. So it is through the actions of Abraham that God stopped to be just the God of heaven and became the God of heaven and earth. This is the power of our actions and our attitude in the world. It's not so much to tell us how great Abraham was. It's more an invitation for us to consider, because sometimes we can think, oh, I'm just a little person. I'm not too good. I'm not too bad. I'm kind of all right. I'm not doing so much damage. But the story of Abraham calls us to take a deeper responsibility for our actions and a deeper responsibility for life as a whole, and to consider our life is very important. And even if it's not very clear to us. Yes, Joan, go ahead. And
I'm very appreciative of your teaching about myth and then extending it to your teaching about this piece of Abraham, in that I'm very concrete and I don't metaphorize well, and I don't, and so I would take the invitation to see myth as ongoing inside of me in way too concrete a term. And it was very helpful how you articulated that.
Thank you. And that's great. And what you're actually reflecting is the nature of our age. The reason we take myth and we say myth has become, oh, it's just a myth, is because that's where the collective consciousness is at the moment. And this is an invitation to kind of see through the cracks in this structure where we feel everything is just time and space and causality, in that sense, that there's others. Carl Gustav Jung, that's all the psychologist, that was all his attempt to make us realize that no, we're not just intellect, we are actually informed by myths. So this is a very important thing that we do for ourselves, to try and recognize what a myth is for us, and also for the whole discourse that we have about life. Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, Razel.
Hi, thanks. Hi, Igal. I just thought since I thought I'd share this since there weren't a lot of hands up, just that I felt my first like personal connection with Abraham when I learned from my rabbi here that Abraham was like the first. So forgive me for any inaccuracies here, but the first time like God built like a channel in a person and came down. That's my understanding. And I find it so meaningful, like bizarre to my part of my linear brain, that I find so meaningful could have started 3 world religions and be the foundation of a many billion people's thoughts or whatever beliefs. But I became very interested in it for myself, because like really it's the first, when I had something open and come into me, that was the first time that had ever happened for me. And I find it amazing that you're now here inviting me into the course. I'm very intrigued, and I'm very intrigued. And I think that's about where I am in the journey, actually. Having felt a connection in the past, but not having had much of a way to integrate it. So I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm very interested in kind of continuing with it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And let me just use this as a springboard to illuminate something also. That yes, it's the first person who channeled the light, so to speak. But let's forget our notion of a person in history. The first time you experience that channel, that's Abraham in you. So it's a principle of life rather than a story of a human being. We are complex beings. We have Abraham in us, and we have all kinds of things that have nothing to do with Abraham in us. And the invitation to dwell on the Abraham in us is to shift the balance towards that which we all most deeply want. I loved when Martin asked us to connect to that part of ourselves that brought us here. Hey, listen, it's a Sunday afternoon. At least for me, it's afternoon. I don't know what it is for you, for each and every one of you. It's a Sunday afternoon. The weather's pretty nice. There would be other things to do on a Sunday afternoon than spend time on this. But something is calling you. The Abraham in you, that in you which wants to have a deeper connection, calls you, oh, what is there for me? And I want to say that there are no silly questions. Sometimes I feel, oh, I want to ask, but everybody probably also knows the answer. Yes, go ahead, Yella. You're muted.
Thank you for that, and hello to everybody. Yeah, I'm also very impressed, and a lot of this is new to me. And I could also talk about the myth, but I would like to address one question. And you said, like, if I got you right, that like Noah was more of an obeying God, whereas Abraham was challenging God. And the one story that I know about Abraham is that he was willing to sacrifice his son, which seems quite obedient to me. And I'm sure we will address this more throughout the course, but if you could just say a little bit about this.
Beautiful. I love this question. And the rabbis wrestled with this so much. You know, this was really a problem. How is it that this man fought with God for the Sodom and Gomorrah, and when he was told to sacrifice his son, he was willing to do that? The inconsistency was very painful to the rabbis, and they wrote so much about this. So yes, first of all, we are all, one thing that I like to say, and I derive a lot of encouragement from, is no character in the Bible is perfect. None. In the Hebrew Bible, they are all imperfect, and their imperfections are displayed for all to see. And I feel there's a lesson in that our relationship to God is always in the context of our humanity. And sometimes we will be connected to one aspect of our personality. Sometimes there will be another, because we are all complex individuals. And on the spiritual path, you know, the philosopher Shankara, the Indian philosopher Shankara, said that walking the spiritual path is like walking on a razor's edge. Now, walking on the razor's edge is not a very pleasant heaven on earth type of experience. It's tough. And as we know, our own search for greater awareness and greater development of our consciousness is not always simple. And we are contradicting ourselves at times. So I personally take that to be the case in Abraham, and there's other problematic things about Abraham that are displayed in the Bible. Okay. And it also shows, at least that part of us, which is Abraham, is willing to take huge risks. When we are called, when the spiritual fire is lit in us, we are willing to take huge risks. And I think that is the main lesson that I take from the story of Abraham's willingness to obey. He was willing to go for, he put all the, if we use the Las Vegas metaphor, he was willing to put all the chips on one number. And that number is God, a complete trust. So there's so many ways to see that particular story. I hope that supplies some sort of answer. But thank you for the question. Beautiful question. I love that.
Thank you.
I just, thank you. Beautiful, all of the teachings, and this, I'm very happy to be here. And I just want to say, when you spoke about, any possible intention for the future and everything, I felt really excited. I feel really you're starting a movement here. Maybe, we don't know, but it feels like there's something, there's a momentum here that's really beautiful. I'm very touched by that. And I have Jewish and Christian roots, so I'm very touched by that to be here. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think just to say that one of the things that we can learn from Abraham is that every action of ours starts a movement. Sometime an action can multiply itself and start a big movement, but all that we have no control. But our care always starts a movement, and sometimes it's a movement that's seen, and sometimes it's a movement that isn't seen. So I appreciate you saying that we're starting a movement, and I say, yes, we are. Thank you. Yes, please. I don't know which of you, Razel or Scott, want to speak.
Yeah, I just have a question about the format of the course. Like each week, almost what will it look like? Like, will it all be teaching? Will it be some teaching and interaction, or just what is it? Yeah, what will it look like?
So you had a little bit of a taste of the format. It's going to be 90 minutes. It'll start with Martin's skillful meditation guidance. Then there will be some teachings of mine, maybe 15, 20, 25 minutes, depends. Then you will break into probably triads rather than dyads to discuss what came up. And then there'll be a Q&A. This format allows us to not just blurt out information, but really assimilate and see how it affects us. How is this dealing with this question? What is the effect on me? So,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.